Hello, I'm Jeffrey K. Mondello, editor of the Boston Catholic Journal. Thank you for joining me today. Today I would like to discuss the third temptation of Christ and the pathology of Powe, and why we ought to tremble. Let us look first at the third temptation and be clear about what was involved in it. We find it in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. And I quote, "And the devil led him into a high mountain, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And he said to him, To thee will I give all this power, and the glory of them, for to me they are delivered, and to whom I will I give them." To each of us, in some manner, this passage should be construed as one of the most frightening in all Holy Scripture. I will explain why. Everyone in any position of power, of authority, of dominion over the lives of others in any way, in any measure, especially within the Church, should tremble before these words. Read them once again, if you've opened the Bible, and reflect on them. Prelate or pastor, chairman or manager, senator or selectman, if you possess power over others which you can arbitrarily exercise to their detriment, you should be concerned, gravely concerned. You presume to know from whom you receive the power you possess. It is very likely that, in truth, whoever you are, or whatever your office, you do not really wish to know, as long as you possess. Power is possession, and possession is power. Each is signatory to the other, and both are the signature of power. Do you doubt it? How prepared are you to relinquish your power, to cede even some portion of it to another? How prepared are you to become subject to another as others are now subject to you? If you fear this, why do you fear? From what likelihood of injustice do you flee? And if you would flee it as an evil, why do you now embrace it as a good? In a word, why does the possession of power please you? Why do you esteem it a good? In fact, so great a good that you are unwilling or reluctant to relinquish it? If you do not pause to dwell on that question and to answer it honestly, then it is power that possesses you, and not you who possess power. It is power as pathological, subjugating others, but no longer susceptible to being subjugated itself. It is the will as recalcitrant to itself. While able to exercise control over others, it does so in and through the inability to exercise control over itself. It is in the end incapable of dispossessing itself. The will and power become synonymous, such that the act of willing itself becomes indistinguishable from the power that motivates it. The will retains its primacy, but no longer its autonomy. It is free to exercise power, but it is no longer free to relinquish it. It is free to exact, but not to yield, to lay levy, but to pay no tribute, to dominate, but not to submit. This is power as tyranny, uncurbed by reason, and, where it possible, unrestrained. Its end is always itself, and not the other, except inasmuch as the end of another redounds to its own end. In this sense, it is the apotheosis of the self construed as a god. If we have read Homer, we find that the principal difference between the Homeric gods and men is nothing in the way of exemplary virtue. There is as much moral turpitude among the gods as among men. Only a difference in the magnitude of power, in the exercise of power, most often arbitrarily, and almost always tragically. We are without excuse. All the reasons that we invoke to cling to this euphoric caricature of power are so many pretensions and lies. One day, and not a day of our choosing, that power will be taken from us and utterly cease, or pass to another. Pharaoh, Caesar, emperor, king, prelate, president, chairman of the board, manager, supervisor, every stratum of power under which man bends, oppressed, subdued, exploited, has its end and its accountability. Even if it is expunged from history, erased from living memory, it will stand in the dock before God and testify against us. Before we take the seat of power, then, we must know the liability that we incur. As the magnitude of power escalates, so too the susceptibility to evil, implicit within it, attendant to it. And with ever greater urgency, we must ask ourselves, from whom, truly, does this power derive? To what end, and at whose expense? If this question does not make us tremble, we can be sure from whom it comes. For even the just, St. Paul tells us, work out their salvation in fear and trembling. Today, especially, this is particularly apropos of those in the church. Why, you ask? Because, as it has been said, in the church, where the light is brightest, the shadows are deepest. It is the lamp set upon a hill. It is a light to the nations. It is the preeminent moral authority among Catholic Christians, and up until the last 25 years, even non-Christians. Here, the grasping for power, the arbitrary exercise of power, the relishing of power, especially to the detriment of the powerless, is not simply utterly inconsistent with, but is an egregious defection from Jesus Christ, who emptied himself of power and came among us as one who serves. Yet even here, where the light prevails, the shadows linger, and the brighter the light, the deeper the shadows. Here, encountering what is most noble, we also encounter what is utterly base. We would do well, I think, to consider the dark provenance or source of power. Once again, let us carefully listen to St. Luke's account of the third temptation of Christ. I quote again, "And the devil led him into a high mountain, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And he said to him, To thee will I give all this power, and the glory of them. For to me they are delivered, and to whom I will, I give them." Ponder that carefully. While the evil one is indeed the father of lies, we can never be certain of the provenance or the source of the power that we possess over others. The seat of power is at best a perilous perch, a height that is commensurable to a deep depth. We flatter ourselves that we have acquired power through our wit, our talent, our ability, our intelligence. In short, that we merit power. We deserve it. We have earned it. It is ours in justice as in recompense. This, of course, is a fiction. Another scenario is as likely. We may convince ourselves that we have acquired this power through our cleverness. We have insinuated ourselves into power by manipulating people, currying some, crushing others, assiduously constructing a network of connections that will be the conduit to the pinnacle of power. In a word, we deceive. In one sense, we misunderstand power, politely dismissing it even as we lust for it. The reality, however, is that power in our own lives, no less than in the life of the Church, can be either magnificently redemptive or, as we have more often seen, unimaginably destructive. It can lift by the hand or it can crush by the fist. It can preserve life or take it, feed or make famine. It can heal and it can maim. Power can exonerate, and power can crucify. The ancient allurement to the unbridled, even the gratuitous expression of our own will against all that would curb it, against the reproach of justice, even against the reproval of reason itself, is not merely an enticement. It is a frightful human liability, a liability of which Satan is keenly aware and equally adept at exploiting. Power becomes an asset in itself, and when this occurs, a liability to it becomes fully exploited by the evil one, and the means to the exploitation of others. And this is to say that power is always relational. It asserts itself through possession and influence, It seeks and claims dominion, uncurbed self-expression, and unrestrained self-assertion. It boldly manifests itself not merely in the amassing of material goods, but most perniciously in the acquiring of ever-escalating positions, titles, and offices, which themselves escalate the power through which they were first acquired. Having become an asset ever increasing in value through escalation, power culminates in personality and power, in the personality that possesses the power, and in the power that possesses the personality. At this point, we confront power as pathology. Inextricable from the personality, it becomes the expression of the personality. But because it is always and intrinsically relational, the expression is always exercised to the spiritual, psychological, physical, or moral detriment of others. Power as pathology cannot be otherwise, cannot express itself otherwise, for it is preeminently the power to assert one will against the protest and always the good of another. In the next discussion, in the following video, we will look at the sole antidote to the pathogen of power. Custodia te Deus.